Welcome back to English Through Wisdom. I hope you learned something valuable from our last lesson. It is wonderful to have you here again today.
The rain in Osaka does not fall gently. It falls with purpose, as if it has somewhere important to be. On a bench outside the city employment office, a 50-year-old man sits with a briefcase on his knees. Inside it are 42 resumes. Not one has been accepted. His suit is clean, pressed by habit rather than hope, and his hands are folded the way they were folded 30 years ago on his first day of work, when everything still felt certain. He does not know it yet, but in less than an hour, a stranger will ask him one question that no interviewer ever thought to ask, and that question will save his life. Years later, he would finally understand the wisdom hidden inside that rainy morning. Welcome to English Through Wisdom. Here we learn English through powerful stories and timeless lessons from cultures around the world. Today's story comes from Japan, and it is about a man who lost everything he built in 30 years, and the strange decision that gave him something better. His name was Kenji Sato, and for almost 30 years he had worked for the same manufacturing company in Osaka. He was never the man people pointed to in meetings. He never asked for a promotion, never fought for a bigger office, never once raised his voice in anger at a colleague. He simply showed up every single morning at exactly 7:45 and did the work in front of him until it was finished properly. His wife, Yumi, used to tease him about it. "You would apologize to the vending machine if it broke," she said once, laughing. And he had laughed too, because it was true. He was that kind of man, careful, dependable, quiet in a way that made people trust him without knowing exactly why. At home, dependability looked like small, repeated acts of love. When the dining chair cracked, he did not buy a new one. He spent a Saturday afternoon gluing and clamping it back together, sanding the edges smooth, because his son Haruto had scratched his initials into the underside of that chair when he was 6, and Kenji could not bear to throw those initials away. Every Sunday morning, without fail, he made tamagoyaki for breakfast, slightly too sweet, exactly the way Yumi liked it, and he did not. He never missed a birthday. He never missed a school recital. Haruto grew up believing, with the simple certainty of a child, that his father was a man who would always be there, and for a long time that belief was completely justified. Life was ordinary. Kenji loved ordinary. He used to say that the most dangerous ambition a man could have was wanting more than what already made him happy. Then, one Tuesday morning in early spring, his department manager called him into a small meeting room that smelled of instant coffee and printer toner. There was no shouting, no dramatic scene, just a folder placed gently on the table and a sentence that Kenji would replay in his mind for months afterward. "Automation has made your position unnecessary, Sato-san. We are very grateful for your 30 years. A handshake, that was all. 30 years, reduced to a handshake and a folder containing severance details. He walked home that day the long way, past the river, telling himself it would be fine. He was experienced, he was reliable. Someone would want a man like him. Weeks became months. He sat across from interviewers half his age, watched their eyes move quickly down his resume, and heard variations of the same sentence over and over. "We're really looking for someone with a bit more energy for this role." Nobody said the word old. Nobody had to. He understood exactly what they meant, and each time, something inside him quietly folded a little smaller. The savings, carefully built over decades, began to disappear faster than he expected. Medical costs for his mother's care, the mortgage, Haruto's university fees. First he sold the good camera his father had left him, the one he used to photograph Haruto's school festivals. Then his watch, a graduation gift from Yumi's parents. Then the good dining chairs, the ones he had once repaired so carefully, replaced by cheaper folding ones that did not creak with memory. Each sale felt less like losing an object and more like losing a piece of the man he used to be. At home, the silence grew heavier than any argument could have been. Yumi tried, at first, to comfort him. She would sit beside him in the evenings and gently ask how the interviews went, and he would answer in short, flat sentences, unable to look at her, ashamed that he had nothing better to report. Slowly, even her questions stopped. Not because she stopped caring, but because watching him disappear a little more each week had become its own kind of exhausting grief. One evening in autumn, she packed a small bag. "I'm not leaving you," she said quietly at the door, and he believed she meant it, even as her suitcase wheels clicked against the hallway tiles. "I just cannot watch you disappear anymore, and I do not know how to stop it. I need to breathe, Kenji. Just for a while." She went to stay with her sister across the city. Haruto's calls became shorter, then rarer, filled with the awkward silences of a young man who did not know how to comfort a father he had never seen broken before. Kenji did not blame either of them. That was, in its own way, the cruelest part. He simply agreed with the quiet verdict his own mind kept delivering. He had failed the people he loved most, and there was no folder, no severance package that could soften that particular truth. He began avoiding the streets near his old office, certain that former co-workers would look at him with pity, or worse, relief that it had not happened to them. Whether anyone actually judged him this way no longer mattered. His own mind had become far crueler than any stranger could be. Without a job title to hand people at parties, without a paycheck to slide across the table at home, he found himself asking a question that grew heavier every single day. If I cannot provide, then who exactly am I? One afternoon, caught in a sudden downpour after yet another rejected interview, he ducked into the nearest shelter he could find. A narrow, old-fashioned tea shop tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a bicycle repair stall. The owner, an elderly man with steady hands and unhurried movements, glanced at the soaked folder of resumes under Kenji's arm, but he did not ask about work. Instead, as he set a small cup of tea in front of him, he asked, "How long have you been carrying something heavier than those papers?" Kenji blinked, caught completely off guard. He opened his mouth to deny it, to say he was fine, that this was just bad weather and bad luck, but nothing came out. The old man did not push. He simply poured the tea, unhurried, and let the silence settle between them like something almost comfortable. After several long minutes, he spoke again, quietly, as if sharing something private rather than teaching a lesson. "In Japan, we have an old saying, Nanakorobi Yaoki. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. Kenji managed a tired, hollow smile. "I've stood up enough times already, Oji-san. It hasn't done much good." The old man studied him for a moment, not unkindly. "No," he said gently. "I do not think you have stood up yet. I think you have only been trying, very hard, to return to the life you had before. That is not standing up. That is looking backward while your legs are still bent. Standing up means becoming someone new." The words settled into Kenji quietly that night, and refused to leave. The next morning, without fully understanding why, Kenji made a decision that surprised even himself. He did not print another resume. Instead, he walked to a small community workshop 2 streets from his apartment, the kind of place with a hand-painted sign, where retired carpenters helped elderly residents repair broken furniture free of charge. He asked if they needed an extra pair of hands. No salary was offered. No promise of anything at all. Just something useful to do with the hours that had begun to feel unbearably empty. Yumi, when he mentioned it on the phone, sounded worried rather than relieved. "Kenji, that isn't a job. You need an income, not a hobby." His old colleagues, the few who still returned his calls, seemed to think he had simply given up and found a polite way to hide it. Even Kenji himself was not entirely certain he was making the right choice. But that night, For the first time in nearly a year, he slept without waking at 3 in the morning with his chest tight and his mind racing through numbers that never balanced. Week after week, he sanded, glued, and repaired. A wobbling table for an elderly widow, a cracked cabinet door for a retired schoolteacher. He began teaching a few curious teenagers from the neighborhood basic woodworking on Saturday afternoons, showing them how to read the grain of a piece of wood before cutting it, how patience mattered more than force. People began thanking him, not for being successful, not for his old title or his old salary, but simply for being helpful. It had been a very long time since Kenji had felt genuinely useful to another human being, and the feeling arrived quietly, almost shyly, like an old friend he had forgotten he missed. One afternoon, a woman who owned a small cafe nearby noticed the careful joinery on a chair he had repaired for her neighbor. She asked if he might restore a set of antique tables she had inherited. He said yes, nervously, unsure if his skills were truly good enough for paid work. They were. Word moved quietly through the neighborhood the way word does in places where people still know their neighbors' names. Another customer arrived, then another. It was not fast, it was not dramatic, it was slow, patient, and entirely real, built on trust rather than luck. 2 years later, Kenji stood in his own small workshop, sunlight falling through sawdust in the air, surrounded by furniture waiting to be restored. It was nothing luxurious. No glass office, no impressive title on a business card. Just honest work, built with his own 2 hands, one repaired chair at a time. One afternoon, a young man walked in, perhaps 25, clutching a folder of resumes that had clearly been rejected more than once. He asked awkwardly if there might be any work available. Kenji looked at him and saw with painful clarity himself from 2 years earlier. He did not immediately mention the workshop's needs. Instead, he walked to the small kettle in the corner, poured 2 cups of tea, and set one gently in front of the young man. Then he asked, quietly, "How long have you been carrying something heavier than those papers?" The same question that had once, on a rainy afternoon, quietly saved his own life. The proverb at the heart of this story is written in Japanese as Chi Juan Biba Chiki, and it is pronounced Nanakorobi Yaoki. It translates literally to fall 7 times, stand up 8, and it has been passed down in Japan for generations, often taught to children through simple stories, yet carrying meaning that only becomes fully clear much later in life. At first glance, the saying appears to be about persistence, about simply trying again after failure. But notice the numbers carefully. 7 falls, 8 rises. The number of times a person stands up is always 1 greater than the number of times they fall. That single detail carries the true meaning. It is not asking anyone to be flawless or to avoid failure altogether. It is a quiet promise that no matter how many times life knocks a person down, rising is always still possible, 1 more time than falling ever was. This is exactly what Kenji misunderstood at first, sitting exhausted in that tea shop. He believed he had already stood up enough because he kept trying to rebuild the exact life that had been taken from him. But Nanakorobi Yaoki was never about restoring what was lost. It was about becoming someone capable of a different kind of life altogether. The old man's gentle correction, that standing up means becoming someone new, is the true heart of this centuries-old wisdom. This is why the proverb has survived for so long in Japanese culture, appearing in art, in children's toys shaped like the round, self-righting Daruma doll that always returns upright no matter how hard it is pushed, and in quiet conversations between generations. It endures because it speaks to something every human being eventually faces. The moment when the old plan simply stops working, and the only real choice left is what kind of person to become next. There is a particular kind of pain that comes not from failing once, but from watching your identity slowly dissolve alongside your circumstances. Kenji did not lose his job and immediately become someone new. He lost his job and then, slowly, painfully, He lost the story he had been telling himself about who he was. Provider. Reliable one. The man who fixes things. Perhaps you have felt something similar. Perhaps it was not a job. Perhaps it was a relationship that ended. A dream that quietly closed its doors. Or a version of yourself that no longer seemed to fit the life you were actually living. Have you ever measured your own worth by what you could provide, rather than who you actually were underneath all of that? It is worth sitting with a harder question too. Have you ever judged someone in Kenji's position too quickly, assuming that unemployment or hardship reflected laziness or lack of effort, without knowing the quiet, ordinary courage it takes simply to keep showing up each day? And perhaps the most important question of all, if the life you built came apart tomorrow, would you spend your energy trying to rebuild exactly what was lost? Or would you allow yourself, like Kenji, to become someone new? There is no simple answer. But the question itself is worth carrying with you, long after this video ends. Repeat this paragraph aloud, slowly at first, then at natural speed. He did not know it yet, but in less than an hour, a stranger would ask him one question that no interviewer had ever thought to ask. He was not looking for sympathy. He was not looking for advice. He simply wanted, for one quiet moment, to stop pretending that everything was fine. And when the old man finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost gentle, as if he already understood exactly how heavy that folder of papers truly was. Kenji never got his old life back. He built something better, one repaired chair at a time, one honest conversation at a time. He learned that falling is never the true failure. The only real failure is deciding never to rise again, and deciding, when you finally do rise, to become nothing more than who you already were. Keep learning English, keep discovering stories, and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.
If you enjoyed learning English through this ancient saying, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need this wisdom today. Until next time, keep learning English and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.